Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Tutor Linear Test Prep. Today I'll be providing a full walkthrough of the Digital PSAT NMSQT Math Linear PN number 1. Quick disclaimer, this video will cover the linear non-adaptive PN practice test found on College Board's website. Many of the questions from these tests are duplicated in the Blue Book app, which I've already covered in previous videos. This video will only cover the unique questions, so there are no repeats. A link to the linear test unique PDFs will be in the description. I highly recommend you complete the questions yourself before watching this video. Let's get started. Okay. So for our first question, it looks like we have a unit conversion. So if you haven't, please check out my Ottocento video on unit conversions. So what we're going to do, we're going to first write 44 tablespoons. Then we're going to set up a conversion factor. And we're going to put one thing on the top from the conversion factor and one thing on the bottom. I'm going to put 1 tablespoon on the bottom. And 3 teaspoons on the top. And the reason I do this is so that tablespoons and tablespoon are on opposite sides of the division sign, so they cancel. So now if I do this on a calculator, I will be left with units of teaspoons, which is what we want. So that looks really good. So I highly recommend, even if it's a really simple one, just whipping out Desmos and typing it in exactly as written, just so that we don't make a careless mistake. So I'm going to do 44 times 3 divided by 1, and that gives me 132. So let's come back over here. So that is 132 teaspoons, which is answer choice C, and that is the correct answer. Great. Okay, went over this in the Ottocento percents video. So whenever you have a percent of, what we want to do is we want to change the percent to a decimal. So you divide that percent by 100, and we change the of to multiplication. So this would read 23 over 100 times 100. And at this point, if you want, you can just put this straight into a calculator, or you can realize that these 100s will cancel out, and you should just be left with 23. So the answer to this one is A. Again, guys, make sure you know when you see a problem like this, you change the percent to decimal by dividing by 100. And then you have to change the of to a multiplication. Make sure you do both those things. All right, great. Let's keep going. Okay, population density is 230 people per square mile. The county has a population of 85,000 people. What is the area? Okay, so you could treat this like a unit conversion. You could also treat it like a proportion. So I'm going to do people per square mile. And we have 230 people per every 1 square mile. And per means division. That's a really important keyword. When you see per, that means division most of the time. So now we're going to do, the county has a population of 85,100 people. So that goes on top. And then we want to know what the area of the county. So that would be, why don't we call that X, that goes on the bottom. So just double check that all the people are on top and all the areas are on the bottom. Now it can cross multiply, so 230 times X, that's just 230X, and 85,100 times 1, that's just 85,100. And now we can divide both sides by 230. And we should get X equals 370. There's a bunch of ways you could have set that one up. You also could have did a one-step unit conversion like we did in the previous problem. Okay, let's check 370. That's the right answer. Good, let's move on. Okay, triangle shown has a perimeter. Okay, so perimeter is the sum of the outermost edges. If there's any like sides in here, those do not count towards the perimeter. It's gotta be the outer edges of the shape. So the sides are x, y, and z. So we can write perimeter. So that's x plus y plus z. And the question tells us the perimeter is equal to 22. So we can put 22. And now we're going to make x 9 and y 7. So 9 plus 7 plus z equals 22. Well, 9 plus 7 is 16. Now we're going to subtract 16 from both sides. And we should get 6. And that is answer choice A. 1.9A is correct. Great. Okay, this is a evaluating a function. So h of negative 2. That just means everywhere you see an x, you put negative 2. So we're going to do 3 times negative 2 minus 7. That gives you negative 6 minus 7, which is negative 13. And that is answer choice A, which is correct. And of course, we could also do this on Desmos. So h of x equals 3x minus 7. And then h of negative 2, we get negative 13. So that is super, super helpful. Make sure you know how to do that on Desmos as well, because it might save you a little bit of time on a harder question. All right, let's come back over here. Okay, this is in standard form, so I'm going to use elimination because it's in standard form. And we want to find x, so I'm going to, in particular, eliminate the variable that I do not want, which is y. To find x, hopefully that kind of makes sense. To find x, we want to get rid of y. Well, I don't really need to do anything because the y's already have the same number but opposite sign. So all I need to do is add the two equations. So we're going to add the two equations. X plus x, that's 2x. 2y plus negative 2y, that just gives you 0. And 6 plus 4 is 10. Divide both sides by 2, and we get x equals 5. So that is answer choice B, which is correct. And of course, we can do this one entirely on Desmos. So x plus 2y equals 6. X minus 2y equals 4. And we see that they intersect at 5, 0.5. So the x coordinate is 5. Great, let's come back over here. Okay, I've talked about this many times, a couple times at this point. This is parallel lines cut by a transversal. You can Google it. Really, the only thing you need to understand is that, by the way, it says lines R and S are parallel, so why don't we mark that? So I'll mark that here. So really the only thing you need to understand is that out of like these kind of two sets of angles, all the ones in the same position are equal. Corresponding angles are equal. So watch, I'm going to label them all in a different color. The top left is equal to each other. The top right is equal to each other. The bottom left is equal to each other. And the bottom right is equal to each other. There are other rules for parallel lines cut by a transversal, but this is really the only one you need to know for like 90% of SAT questions is corresponding angles are equal. Let me write that down. Corresponding angles. Okay, anyway. So we have to either pull over the X to the bottom one, or we have to pull the Y up to the top left one. Why don't, for the sake of it, I don't know, just because I feel like it, why don't we do it this way? So the X can go in the green. And when you have two angles next to each other that form a straight line, that is called a linear pair. So linear pairs, they form a straight line. Two angles next to each other that form a straight line. They are supplementary, which means they add to 180 degrees. So this tells us that X plus Y is equal to 180 degrees. So you see, if Y is 65, if you plugged that in, you would get 180 minus 65. You would get X is 115. So you kind of see like, okay, C and D are not true. X plus Y equals 180. It's not less than or greater than 180. So these are wrong. And you see it kind of makes sense where the 115 is coming from, because 115 plus 65 is 180. So that seems to make sense. So now we just have to figure out if it's X is less than or if it's X is greater than. So if Y is less than 65, and X were less than 115, well, if we made those both smaller, like 20 and 110, there's no way we would get 180. It's got to be X is bigger than 115. Because if Y is smaller than 65, X needs to be at 115 or bigger to kind of make up for that. And you can come up with a bunch of ways that will satisfy this, right? So, like, for example, I don't know, let's do Y is 62, and then 180 minus 62 is 118. Do you see how that satisfies both of these inequalities? 62 is smaller than 65, and 118 is bigger than 115. If you tried to come up with an example with X smaller than 115, it wouldn't work. You would get a Y bigger than 65. So coming up with an example, probably a good way to figure out, but at the very least, just knowing like one or two things, you can get this one down to two answer choices and get a very good 50-50 guess, even if you weren't sure. Anyway, so the answer is B, and that is correct. Great. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so this is testing us on, it's a projectile quadratics question. The maximum height is the vertex. Tells us the vertex. So some things we really have to know for this one. We have to know vertex form, which is y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And we have to understand that this part right here is the vertex. So 1.8 comma 51.84. That is your vertex. That is your h comma k. And notice how I put the 1.8 first, because x is time. So make sure that you put the 1.8 as is your x, and then the 51.84 is your y. That is really important. See how they kind of gave it to you in the reverse order? Lots of people would have wrote 51.84 comma 1.8. They would have went to do the rest and they would have got it wrong. So just be careful with that. Now the second part, I've talked about this in previous videos, I think, but the second part here says it hits the ground at 3.6 seconds. That is the positive x-intercept. The positive x-intercept for a projectile problem is the time it takes to hit the ground. And so the x, the time, is 3.6. And think about it, when you're on the ground, the height is 0, because you're 0 off the ground. Also, x-intercepts always have a y of 0. Okay, so we have 2 points. So we are now going to put this into vertex form. So y equals a x minus h 1.8 squared plus 51.84. And right away, I mean, this is already looking like answer choice D, right? I mean, there's not really anything else it can be. But I'll show you how to do the rest of it just in case you got a student-produced response. So we plug in 3.6 comma 0 as the x and the y in the equation. So we're going to put 0 equals a 3.6 minus 1.8 squared plus 51.84. And 3.6 minus 1.8 is just 1.8, and then 1.8 squared is 3.24, so we get 0 equals 3.24a plus 51.84. I'm going to subtract 51.84 from both sides, get negative 51.84 equals 3.24a. And now we're going to divide both sides by 3.24. And we're going to get a equals negative 16. And you see we could put that here if you wanted to, and that would give you answer choice D. If you want to remember, I don't know if I would advise this, but I've talked about this before, but if you want to just remember that when the units are seconds and meters, or is it seconds and feet is supposed to give you negative 16? I don't know, but most of the time it has something to do with the units. Most of the time on the SAT, A is just negative 16 if that's just something you want to memorize. I don't know if I would do that though, because what if you got a question that's on the moon and like gravity's different or something, and you know, I don't know, but I would just know that, okay, when it hits the ground, that's an x-intercept, and then the height you start at, that is the y-intercept. So you see how vertex up here, positive x-intercept, that was this guy, and then we didn't get it in this problem. The y-intercept is the initial height. So you got to know which each of those things are. Max height is the vertex, initial height, y-intercept, and positive x-intercept is the time it takes to hit the ground. Great. Let's keep going. Okay, so this is a words to math problem. So the length of the base of a certain parallelogram, we can call that L for length. is, that just means equals. 89% of the height of the parallelogram. Okay, so we could call the height of the parallelogram h. So this would look something like this. L equals 89% of h. And remember what we talked about earlier. We divide the percent by 100, and we change the of to multiplication. 89 divided by 100 should give you 0.89. So it's just 0.89 times h. That is it. $1.25 is D, and then 2.9 is D. Good. All right, we got a triangle, and you can draw it. It says K and L are each 48 degrees. Let's label that. And we want to find J, so why don't we call that X? So triangles have a total of 180 degrees. So all we need to do is just subtract all the angles from 180. And we do that, and we should get 84 degrees. And let's check. That is right. Great, let's keep going. Okay, she purchased 2 sweaters, and sweaters is X. So X equals 2. So we're going to put that in the equation. 40 is 2 plus 20y equals 160. 80 plus 20y equals 160. Subtract 80 from both sides, and we get 20y equals 80. Divide 20 on both sides, and we should get y equals 4, which is the number of shirts. That is answer choice B. Great, let's keep going. Okay, this one I would say is actually at least a little bit of a challenging question, but they just gave you the formula. So you don't really have to do that much, okay? So the volume is equal to area of the base times the height. And the volume, they say, is 216. And the area of the base, which is capital B, is, we don't know. And the height is 8 centimeters. So we just put all those in. Divide both sides by 8, and we should get 27. And that is correct. Great. Okay, so there is one more here. And this one's actually a little bit trickier. But so Desmos can help a lot with this one. But we're going to first, I'm going to show you guys how to do something kind of neat. But we're going to first do it by hand. So kind of the concept you need to understand when you see an exponential function is that growth looks like this and decay looks like this. Now, as long as you have a positive coefficient and all that stuff, typically you're going to have growth when the base of the exponent is greater than 1. And you're going to have decay when the base of the exponent is between 0 and 1. So, do you see how both of these guys, the base of the exponent is less than 1. It's between 0 and 1. So I'm guessing it's going to look like this. So if you just have a graph that looks like this, okay, and you only look from a certain point to the right. The maximum value is going to take place at the leftmost possible x value. See how as I move to the left, it gets bigger? See, so in this example I just drew, the leftmost, the maximum would be right there. So we want the smallest possible value of x. Well, they tell us x is greater than or equal to 0. So the smallest possible value of x is 0. So to find the maximum, for each of these, we're going to just plug in 0. So f of 0 is equal to 33 times 0.4 to the 0 plus 3. And then g of 0 is 33, 0.16, 0.4 to the 0 minus 2. Now that's a lot of math. I'm just going to type that in my calculator. Let's see what I get. Lots of decimal math. Okay, so I'm getting 2.112. So that's the maximum of f. And then for the other one, I'm getting, let's see. For the other one, I'm getting 33. So now this part, this always confuses people. Which of the following displays as a constant or coefficient? So all you do is, now that you figured that out, you look and you see what, which one has those numbers. So I'm going to look at the maximum, 2.112. Is there a 2.112 in this equation anywhere? No, I don't see a 2.112. So I bet you 1 is out. And let's look at this one, 33. Okay, is there a 33 on display? Oh, I see a 33. Yep. So this one does have the max on display. So I am thinking the answer is B, 2 only, which is the correct answer. Okay, awesome. All right, so now we could have done this one almost knowing nothing using Desmos. So let's try it. So I'm going to type in f of x equals 33, 0.4, x plus 3, and then g of x equals 33, 0.16, 0.4, x minus 2, and you see it kind of shows me like the whole thing. One thing we could do is we could just type in x is greater than or equal to 0, and then we can kind of see like it should like tell us what the leftmost value is. So you see it says 2.112, and then that one says 33. Another way you can get around this is you can add, I don't have a video on this, but Desmos has a video on this. You can add a domain restriction by doing a curly bracket and then putting x is greater than or equal to 0. And then do that on the bottom one too, curly bracket, x is greater than or equal to 0. And you can very clearly see that the maximum is just the y-intercept, right? So, and if you want, you can just click on it. It tells you a 33 and 2.112. So really either of those ways would have worked, either plotting x is greater than or equal to 0, or going and adding the domain restriction at the end. So That could be really helpful for visualizing a question. If it says, oh, you consider this graph when x is greater than or equal to 3, you could just put at the end, bracket x greater than or equal to 3, and it'll just plot that portion of it for you, which is really helpful. Okay, great. Time for the outro. Okay, that completes the lesson. Please like and subscribe for more digital SAT math content. If you are interested in my tutoring services, the link to my website will be in the description. I tutor SAT math on all math subjects from about 7th grade to AP/early college level. Thanks for stopping by, and good luck studying.